Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and this is the meeting for January the 14th, 2019, our annual meeting for the York County School Board. And thankfully, we missed the snow that was just right around us, which we didn't miss last year. We got it, but this year we missed it. So as we move on to our organizational business, I'd like to ask Dr. Shandor to handle this portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Good evening, board members. So I need to open the floor to nominations for board chairman.
Nominate Mr. Richardson.
Okay.
Normally, protocol, vice chair would be stepping up to chair. Time commitments, work commitments, family commitments don't allow me to do that this year, so I would like to nominate Mr. Richardson to continue in that position.
Okay, I now need a motion to close the nominations.
Move to close nomination.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Please poll the board.
Yes, a motion was made by Dr. George to nominate Mr. Richardson for board chair, and it was closed by Mr. Medford. So I would like to go ahead and take a roll call. Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Haywood?
Yes.
Dr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Medford?
Yes.
And Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
And
All right. Well, thank you.
Congratulations to your new board chair.
I look forward to another year. It's almost like once you get a year under your belt, especially as a new member, you're just now kind of getting the hang of it. So looking forward to this year. So now we're going to open up our nominations for board vice chair. So the floor is open for board.
I'd like to nominate Robbie George to be vice chair again. I know that he didn't have the opportunity, things just didn't align right for him to be chair this year, but his leadership is proven. So I'd like to see him continue as vice chair with Mr. Richardson.
All right. Is there a motion to close nominations?
I move to close nominations.
Right. Nominations are closed. Ms. Ford, if you poll the board.
Yes, a motion was made by Mr. Medford to elect Dr. George as board vice chair, and the motion was closed by Mrs. Haywood. So I'll take the roll call now. Mr. Medford?
Yes.
Mrs. Haywood?
Yes.
Dr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
No.
And Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Motion passed 4-1.
Okay. Thank you, and congratulations to our new board vice chair, Dr. George. And thank you, Dr. George, for serving last year as vice chair, and looking forward to working with you again this year.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Good job, man.
So now we move into the crux of our organizational meeting, our resolution 19-01 approving the county school board organizational business calendar for the year 2019. And hopefully the members have already had an opportunity to review this resolution and the attachments prior to the meeting. But I'd like to ask the superintendent to share some comments pertaining to the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Board members, in front of you, you have the work session meeting schedule. You have the work session meeting schedule, the regular meeting schedule, committee assignments, and school board policy manual review schedule. You have that information in front of you, so if there's any questions, comments, or any adjustments or revisions that we need to make.
I would like to make one revision. I know Mr. Anderson has expressed interest, and especially as a new board member, to be the board member representative for the Career and Technical Education Advisory Committee. And Dr. George, are you still good with being the alternate there?
Where is that now?
That's down near the next to the last on the bottom. They meet usually on in the morning on usually a Thursday, I think, every other month.
I mean, I'm on the New Horizons Education Board.
So you're good with it?
I can do it. I don't have a particular desire to do it. But
Okay.
if you need me to do it, I'll be glad to do it.
You were the alternate, but what you're saying that Mr. Anderson would be the
He would be the representative,
So
correct?
we now need an alternate
We now
for
need
that.
an alternate.
Which was me last year.
Right. I can do the alternate and step
Okay.
over if you'd like me to do that. Dr. George, nobody else.
That's fine,
Okay.
Mr. Richardson.
Ms. Ford, will you make those adjustments?
I sure will.
And the School Board Association Annual Convention Delegate, that's typically the board chair and vice chair. Unless we couldn't do it. I was a teller this past year, so I was unable to make it. So if that happens again, we'll adjust as we're needed for that. Any other adjustments or questions to the committee assignments or any other?
The Health Advisory Committee, Barbara, you gonna stay on that?
Yes.
And Cheryl, are you still doing Ms. Parr? You still doing it? Okay. Why do we have two alternates?
One's a,
Board member.
Board
I think
member
we
and the
need to have
other is
board
a-
You have to
representation.
have a board member on that?
It would be good to have board representation, I believe.
Okay.
I want to think it's been the last few years that we've had school division personnel on it. It used to be board member, if I recall.
I was on the committee last year before.
may have been the year before, because I think Ms.
Yeah,
Haywood was on
yeah.
it last year. This is last year's.
And we just need to make sure we get the dates out that they will be meeting.
Yeah.
Are there any other, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No,
Any other comments or adjustments to that, the schedule of the meetings, the work sessions, or the review of the school board policy manual?
Again, these are things that we put in place and we vote on now. Anything is fluid with us,
Absolutely,
and they will change as the need arise.
absolutely. So was also the Virginia VSBA Code of Conduct, was that part of that resolution? I'm sorry. Or is that separate?
Separate item.
It's a separate item.
Separate item, it is a separate item, you're right. Okay, so is there a motion and a second to approve Resolution 19-01?
Move approval.
Barb,
Second. And a second. Ms. Ford, if you would poll the board, please.
Yes, a motion was made by Mrs. Haywood and seconded by Mr. Medford to approve Resolution 1901, approving the school board organizational issues outlined in the 2019.
Yes.
Mrs. Haywood?
Yes.
Dr. George?
yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
And Mr. Richardson?
Yes. All right, now we're going to move into the VSBA Code of Conduct that board members do every year. All the board members have signed it, and I don't know if we can pull that up. Yeah, we have it up on the screen there. So that's just this is a general VSBA Code of Conduct that school boards go by, and all the members have signed that. So if there's a motion and a second to approve the Code of Conduct for board members, we can take that. I think last year I did read some excerpts from it. For example, one of them is I'll make policy decisions based on available facts and appropriate public input. I will respect the confidentiality of privileged information and make no individual decisions or commitments that might compromise the board or administration. And I will always remember to be the foremost concern for the school board to improve and enhance the teaching and learning experience for all students in the public schools in Virginia. That's just some excerpts from some of the bullets from this, but it is going to be on our board docs page for citizens to view if they'd like to view that too. So do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the Virginia School Board Association's Code of Conduct for school board members.
And a
Thank you.
second?
Thank you, Ms. Haywood and Dr. George. Ms. Ford?
Yes, a motion was made by Mrs. Haywood and seconded by Dr. George to approve the Code of Conduct for school board members. Mr. Medford?
Yes.
Mrs. Haywood?
Yes.
Dr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
And Mr. Richardson?
Yes. So next we'll move into our presentations, and our first presentation is the Strategic Plan Update Goal 2 Objective 2.9 Students with Disabilities Program Evaluation. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Again, good evening, board members. I'm going to ask Dr. Elaine Gould if she'll please present some information to you this evening concerning the special education program evaluation. Dr. Gould.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Richardson, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. Tonight, I'm going to provide you with an update on goal number 2, objective 9 of the strategic plan. During the development of the 2018 to 2022 strategic plan, several participating stakeholders raised questions about our special education service delivery model and whether we were providing a continuum of services for students with disabilities. So therefore, it was determined that we would include a program evaluation of the special education service delivery model in the strategic plan. So what the program evaluation will provide for us is a really deep and comprehensive look at our current special education service delivery model. We will receive a report from the evaluator, and it will also allow us to determine the extent to which we provide a comprehensive continuum of services, how we maintain appropriate staffing ratios for both our special education teachers as well as our related service providers. Those are both mandated and non-mandated ratios that we'll be looking at. We'll also be looking at whether we're using our staff effectively to both lead and implement our special education programs. On this slide, you're going to see the process that we use to develop the scope of work that's included in the request for proposals. So we started out by collecting input from stakeholders, from our relevant stakeholders. Those included our parents, our teachers, administrators, and district leaders. And they all participated at different times in the same process. So we asked them to identify what they considered to be the most critical issues in our special education delivery here in the York County School Division. And as we did that, several themes emerged from those conversations. One being, again, the continuum of services for students with disabilities. Another was the allocation of resources, whether those be human resources or resources allocated to each building. And really, they also wanted to know how we compare with other school divisions. What is it like, and how do they implement special education programs in other school divisions in Virginia that compare to us? I also reached out to my Region 2 director colleagues and asked if they had had program evaluations completed in their divisions. And 2 divisions had program evaluations. One of the directors shared her scope of work as well as her RFP with me. So I was able to use that as a model to go by to see if we wanted to replicate some of the things that they had done in their division. So with all of that information, I developed a scope of work for the RFP and submitted that to Cabinet. And Cabinet provided me with some feedback, and once that feedback was incorporated, we provided that information to York County School Division's attorney, and then ultimately it went to central purchasing in the county. We then started in the offeror selection process. So an offeror is a person who submitted the proposal for selection or competition, if you will. In October of 2018, those proposals, their RFP was advertised by central purchasing. And by the end of October, we had 11 proposals from firms across the nation. It was pretty exciting to get that large of a response. So we received those proposals, and we also formed an evaluation committee to review those proposals. That committee was composed of 3 assistant principals, 1 principal, the chief academic officer, Dr. Guy, and myself. And we read all of those proposals to look at each firm's qualifications, their experience with completing an evaluation of this scope and complexity. It is very complex scope of work that we're looking at doing. And then we also looked at price, of course, in determining who we would invite to come for interviews. So central purchasing took us through a process in November, the evaluation committee through a process to identify the top 4 candidates that we wanted to bring in for an interview. And then on December 13th, we interviewed those 4 candidates, narrowed it down to 2. And then in the end, we unanimously selected 1 vendor to complete the program evaluation. We're almost ready to disclose who that person is, but we have to make sure that everyone's been informed who was not selected. So finally, I just wanted to provide with you a timeline for our next steps. Starting now, the evaluation the project is divided into 3 separate phases. And phase 1 is starting now to March, where the company will do a literature review and also develop the instruments to collect the data. The second phase is probably the most intensive, is where they will do the data collection as well as analyze all of that data and put that into a final report for us to review. We'll get that final report at the end of November. We'll review it, provide some feedback, and then we'll get a final report in December. And by the end of December 2019, they will do a presentation for the board and also present you with a report. The report will include recommendations and findings, and we will use those to develop short and long-range plans for improvement for the special education program. That's all I have for you tonight. So at this time, I'll take any questions or comments that you might have.
I just got one question. This is so needed. I'm glad to see us at this juncture of completion, really. I mean, the hard work begins, I guess. Question, though, and that is, internally we have so much in place to help students with a wide variety of disabilities. And then we have the regional, external, private, public, programs that kind of are in our region that we can access. Will this study take in consideration what's out there externally that we sometimes have to use for a student because of their disability, or is it just an internal look?
It's both an internal and external look. So we'll look at the full continuum of what we offer here, beginning with general education and then to more restrictive placements in our regional programs as well as our private programs.
So there's a possibility we may find that regional programs don't fulfill all needs possibly. Would they, I guess my question would be, it's hard to ask the question though, because let's say there's a void, there's something missing that we can't address internally, and there's nothing external out there that can address it or address it the way it should be. How do we deal with a situation like that?
So let me change my answer just a little bit.
Okay.
We won't necessarily be evaluating, say for example, the New Horizons programs for our students with disabilities, but we will look at those processes that we go through to identify those students who may need a more restrictive placement. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, I'm hoping when this is done, and as other school divisions in the region do something similar, that it could drive a decision in the public or private sector or regional programs to have something similar done, or a change, possibly a new program created. This is obviously a part of our student body that is ever changing and developing, and the need is there. It's just, I'll wait for the report.
I would also say primarily that they are looking at what we offer here in the school division as well. So there are some questions regarding, the continuum of placements within our school division as well.
Yeah, because sometimes the question we get from a parent sometimes makes myself as a board member step back and go, as a school division, can we adequately take care of that student and provide the need, or is it an external, which is an IEP decision, obviously, a committee. But I just want to make sure what your study will do is what else is out there for parents to have access to for the success of the child.
Isn't that part of the lit review, that evaluation?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so he may not be familiar with that. He doesn't come from an academic background, so that's where his confusion probably lies.
So they will look at best practices around what the research says about providing a continuum of services for students with disabilities.
They'll also look at other school divisions, high-performing school divisions, to draw comparisons to what services they offer as well. But they really will, because we recognize that there's some gaps in the continuum of services that we provide at present. So it'll be beneficial to have them take all those pieces and determine where they are and to make recommendations as to how we might best address that.
Right. Well, I know years ago when we did this study for behavioral support services, and it was a book this thick of recommendations and changes. Whether it was academic, everything's driven by academics, obviously, and success of students. Anybody would know that with how we focus our programs, IEP meetings, eligibilities, everything. But will that document also be kind of looked at in the scope of what you're doing? So something that was done years ago that's probably somewhat outdated in some cases.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, all of that. The policies, procedures, so standard operating procedures and superintendent's regulations, all of those things will be looked at as well.
Looking forward to it. It's going to be a great project, I think. I'm looking forward to reports along the way. Hopefully we can get like many updates or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was all.
Say what?
Couple of questions, and Dr. Guy, you kind of mentioned on it. My first question, as you gave the report, it's going to take a year for us to get the results. So we won't be implementing it until a year from now. So if there are some inconsistencies or some concerns in that provision now, and what we're doing now, how do we handle this in a year? It was a concern that I'm surprised, although I'm not in your all's academic setting to know this, but to have a year to come forward with a report, and then we don't even put into place something until a year from now.
Well, the other part of this is a comprehensive evaluation is a lot. So when you think about special education services, when you think about speech services, when you think about occupational therapy, when you think about,
Still a full year
It's-
to do that.
it is, and part of it is when they haven't started yet. So once they're able to get started in that work, the timing of this will be leading up to budget time. So we'll be able to review all of those terms, because there may be some non-monetary items that we can make adjustments to. Once we get the information, we can make those adjustments when we receive, whether it's a process, a certain process for eligibility or whatever that may be, we can make those changes. However, when we get the report, there's monetary changes, we'll have to prioritize what those recommendations are.
So concerns that may pop up now,
Sure.
we can handle them. The other question that I had goes back to our student hearings that we often hear, and especially for students who've transferred into York County schools. And they may have had a disciplinary problem and they come before the board because of student conduct code issue. And it's at that time we find out that there was an IEP or some concerns. How do we handle that in the future so it won't come? I don't even know if we see it as a major problem, but I'm beginning to see those issues, and I'm sure other board members, as we go into student hearings. And there are students that have transferred to us, and now we have issues. And when the school division doesn't know there's an IEP or a special ed need, and then it has come to us to our hearing, then we have to step back and address that issue. Would there be anything in that report that would look at that issue?
The one thing they would probably, the evaluation will encompass would be manifestation determination reviews, the MDR process. As you know, when we have a student hearing, that's one of the first documents that we
Right.
review as a student, a child with special needs, and then we review the MDR paperwork. I think what you may be referring to is the transfer process from another state or a military family that moves in or from another school division. I mean, those are things that, quite honestly, every division I've worked in, you struggle with at times, getting those records. I know our counselors work extremely hard with it. I know that Dr. Butler's team, Cheryl, Ms. Parr, and Ms. Siders, they're calling other school divisions to make sure we get those records.
And maybe
as
then
well.
that could be a recommendation from our part to say, are we doing a student an injustice
Yeah.
that we don't have anything right away when they transfer to us? And
It's a
that could be
challenge.
something. Okay.
Certainly.
But right now, we have enough teachers to provide services, to provide the educational support that we need.
Yes. And we are also implementing, we're not waiting for the program evaluation. We've heard people and we're looking at data and we're implementing some practices now to support teachers, who teach students with disabilities in their classrooms.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Gould, for that update. Appreciate that. So, Dr. Shandor, we'll move into you sharing some information on our next strategic plan update relating to teacher compensation.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Mr. Bowen has a number of presentations this evening. So this will be his first presentation. He is going to provide an update on Objective 3.3, teacher compensation. I'll turn it over to Mr. Bowen.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Good evening, Mr. Richardson, members of the board. Dr. Shandor, this evening I'll provide a strategic plan status update on Goal 3.3. Goal 3 of the strategic plan states that the York County School Division will recruit, hire, retain, and support a diverse staff that meets our highest standards. And one of the objectives for this goal is that the compensation package for licensed staff will remain in the top 3 of the Hampton Roads comparator market of 9 school divisions through fiscal year 2022. And when we talk about licensed staff, who are we talking about? These are our teachers, our school counselors, our speech pathologists, our library media specialists, and our educational technology facilitators. And who are our market comparators? Those would include Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Norfolk, Newport News, Hampton, Suffolk, Portsmouth, and Williamsburg, James City County. And I've included on this slide the fall membership of all school divisions, just to give you some perspective of the student population for our comparators. Now, the basis of our comparison are the license pay scales for all of the comparator school divisions. And on this particular slide, and this is just one slide, it's a bachelor's scale slide. This is the bachelor scale for all of our comparators, and it's steps 0 through 30, so there's 31 steps in all. And one thing to note here, what's in blue there under York County's bachelor scale, those are 9 steps, and those are 9 steps that rank in the top 3 for our bachelor scale. And I'm only showing the one scale, but I'll go ahead and move to the results. So for the comparison for rank of 3 or better, as I mentioned, there were multiple scales. There's actually 4 scales we looked at: a bachelor's, a master's plus 30, and a doctorate. And of the licensed employees that I mentioned earlier, there's 975 of those employees. 92% of our licensed employees fall within the bachelor's and master's scale. And as I showed you on that first bachelor scale, 9 of our steps fall in the top 3. That represents 30% of our bachelor scale. And of those 9 steps, 35% of our licensed employees on the bachelor scale fall within those 9 steps. And then on the master's, we take a little dip. We go from 9 to 8. That represents 26% of our steps, and of that, 16% of those employees fall within those 8 steps. Master's plus 30 and doctorate, we actually look really, really good. Of course, the populations are much lower on those scales, but the numbers are very favorable. So what is this data telling us? What you've seen from previous presentations in previous years, obviously these numbers are down. We've slipped from our ranking at 3, and we realize we have some work to do. But we wanted to see how far we slipped. So we added another comparison. We looked at the comparison of rank for 4 or better. And obviously when you look at the numbers, they improved dramatically. So we went from, in the bachelor scale, we went from 9 steps in the top 3 to 16 in the top 4. And 56% of our employees are in those 16 steps. And that went from 35 to 56%. And then on the master scale, we went from 8 steps to 20 steps. And that jumped from 16% employees to 51% of the employees. And as we saw from the previous slide, the numbers for the master's and doctorate were strong. They remain strong. So again, what is this data telling us? We have slipped. We have some work to do. And one of the priorities that we'll be focusing on in this budget process is addressing this issue right here. One of the things that we've been focusing on in compensation is restored steps. And over the past 4 years, we've been able to restore 2 of 5 steps. That's really good work. What many of the other school divisions have been doing is not so much focusing on restored steps, but they've been doing either a one-time or a 2-year adjustment to the scale. And in the process of doing that, the steps along their scales have adjusted, whereas when we restore steps, we're just moving a teacher up the steps, but there's no adjustment to the scale. So in this comparison, we've actually fallen behind where we rank with our current scales to our comparators. So that's some work that we're going to focus in this coming budget process, and we'll look to reposition York County to the top 3 next year, and if not, we'll continue that work throughout the strategic plan.
I mean, we all know it's once you get below and get behind, it doesn't happen overnight to get us back up there. I know this has been ever since my 12 years on the board. It's been this, and we get ourselves back up there, and we allowed ourselves to get down a little bit. And it's just, I just think we really, really, really need to focus on this, which we are, and try to stay up there because it's a whole lot easier than trying to play catch up, no doubt.
So a quick question just while we're on that slide, because I've been on the board for not as long as Barbara, but we've seen it done so many different ways where you have your step increase, or in some years we did a percentage and a one-time or a lump sum, and then we've done it where it's just across the board a percentage increase. We've recreated a pay scale basically. what is a school division? Is there any best practice, better way of doing something to keep this from happening when you do adjustments to a pay scale? I mean, we've just done it so many different ways, trying to master the science behind trying to keep ourselves in that top third. But it seems like other divisions are doing things differently, and we're doing things differently. So at the end of the day, what really works?
I'm going to let Dr. Carroll answer that
Yeah,
question.
so there's no one good way, but what you're seeing is to correct Bill, he said that we weren't doing any market adjustments along the way. We were, but they were really small.
Right.
You know, step in, let's say 0.5%. So the bottom line is you need more of a market adjustment to keep the pace, because we were doing well. The last time we did this presentation, we were up in the top three. I think 75% of the steps were in the top three. We've just lost ground to the others because they've been more aggressive. So it's going to take us being more aggressive in our market adjustments to get there.
Quick question, and you may have said this and I overlooked it. When you look at the 4 categories on the scale, and I know over time we changed to these 4 categories, where are we with other school divisions that just use this 4 categories? I know we changed because school divisions were going this direction. I guess I'm saying if I'm looking at these 4, and this is how we are making the recommendation of where we are and what we need to do, are like school divisions in using the same categories?
Yes, ma'am. So I'll take you back to this. So this is the format that the school divisions use. And this is just one of the scales. So, but all of our comparators have a bachelor's, have a master's scale with 31 steps. So that's, we use our steps and compare against every other school division based on every scale.
I would add
We
that
consolidate,
annually,
yeah.
the state of Virginia, I think it's the VEA actually does it, puts together a salary study across the whole state, and nearly every division has the same structure of all 4 of those.
I knew with VSBA years ago, we looked at like divisions across the state. They were very much like us as a suburban, with the number of students and so forth. We looked at, and see, at one point we were with Albemarle, Henrico, and so forth and so on. Then we also looked at a subgroup that was just us locally. Say the same the school divisions that feed into New Horizons. You're looking at what are your counterparts doing. So it's just interesting to see how this has shifted. And I agree with Dr. George. We need to make our salaries a significant. That's important to us. That we need to make some changes with that.
So why is Pocosa never part of the comparative market?
Mainly because of the size. They're a very small school division, and having come from Pocosa, what we typically did was we compared ourselves to like-sized school division. Now, we did use York County as a comparator because Pocosa competes with York County, but we couldn't compete because we just didn't have the funding to provide the salary increases. But when we look at the school divisions that we compete with, we are very high performing like several of those larger schools. We have the funding and economic base to provide much of the funding to remain competitive. And of course, we want to hire the best. And so in order to hire the best, we need to provide the best salary and best compensation package.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown, for sharing that information on teacher compensation. And Dr. Shandor, do you have information on our FY19 budget?
Yes, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Bowen. I think he has 2 more after this one, but I'll turn it over to him. He's going to provide some information about the FY19 expected budget. Mr. Bowen?
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Mr. Richardson, members of the board, Dr. Shandor, I'm actually going to combine the next 2 together, the next 2 updates together. The first is the FY19 expected budget, which are adjustments to our current year's budget. The expected budget includes technical adjustments to the standards of quality, incentive, categorical, and lottery-funded accounts based on updates to student enrollment. It also includes updates to sales tax and lottery revenue, as well as participation in summer school and regional programs. And based on the state updates for FY19, YCSD can expect to receive about an additional $264,000 more than what was included in the FY19 original budget. These additional funds are a result of updates to our enrollment and will be designated to cover salary and benefits for additional teachers that were hired in late August and September in order to maintain our pupil-teacher ratios across the division. The FY19 expected budget will be formally presented to the board at the March 25th school board meeting for your approval. And that concludes the FY19 expected budget. Are there any questions? Okay. We'll move to the governor's proposed budget for FY20. On this slide, you'll see a comparison between the FY19 expected and the governor's proposed budget for FY20. And if you look to the column to the right, we see changes to various line items. And in total, our expected increase in state funding for next year is $3.7 million. Now, there's two initiatives from the governor's proposed budget that we'll address this evening. The first is increase in funding in the school counselors, and second, an increase in the compensation supplement. Now, first, the governor proposed increasing the funding for additional school counselors, and that funding is included in the basic aid that's highlighted here on this slide. And the governor, what he did was he proposed changing the ratios, decreasing the ratios. So current ratios, SOQ ratios for counselors are 1 to 500 at the elementary, 1 to 400 at the middle, and 1 to 350. And that's going to go down to 1 to 375, 1 to 325, and 1 to 300 respectively. Now again, these are just proposals. This proposal has to go through the General Assembly, so we could ultimately see changes, but this is what we're basing our budget on at this time. And Dr. Guy and her staff are working on this information and to determine where those new counselors are going to be placed. As a result of our current staffing and the proposed changes, we expect that we'll need to hire an additional 4 FTE and school counselors. The second item I want to address this evening is the compensation supplement. Last year, when the General Assembly passed the 2-year budget, FY20 included funding for a 3% salary increase for all SOQ positions. This totaled about $1.4 million. However, when the governor released his budget in December, he increased that funding by 2% to a total of $2.33 million, and that's what's highlighted here on this slide. One thing I want to clarify about the funding for compensation, as I mentioned, as we headed into this budget process and before the governor released his budget, we knew that there was going to be funding for a 3% raise. And when the General Assembly put that in the budget, they provided language that allowed school divisions to either provide the raise in FY19 or FY20, but we weren't going to see the funding until FY20. Now, YCSD, like most other school divisions, provided that raise in FY19. So we have satisfied the legal requirement to receive those funds. And what I mean by that is we will, at the end of FY20, we'll have to certify the superintendent and I that we provided an average raise to the funding that we received to all employees. So when the governor added his amendment and increasing the compensation by 2% for FY20, this is where our clarification and challenge has really been, because when he came out and announced this, he announced that it was going to be a 5% raise for teachers. And it's really a 5% raise for all SOQ positions. But as I mentioned earlier, we've satisfied 3% of that 5% raise. So based on what we're seeing right now, based on the funding and the priorities that we're working through, I can tell you we cannot support a 5% raise for FY20. Now, we're continuing to work through the budget process, and we're looking at various salary scenarios. And but what will ultimately determine the final salary or compensation increase will be determined upon the new revenue that we receive from our state and local governments. So for next steps, we have a public forum on budget on the 28th of January. The superintendent presents his budget on February 4th. On February 23rd, the General Assembly ends, and this will be the first look at the final state numbers. It usually comes in about a week after the General Assembly ends. And on February 25th, we'll have a public hearing on the superintendent's budget. And on March 25th, the board is expected to approve the FY20 budget. And that concludes my budget updates this evening.
Question. The decrease in the composite index, where is that reflected on here? Is that under basic aid?
So the decrease in the composite index occurs in the first year of the biennium. That happened from 18 to 19. So we presented that information last year. So it's already been accounted for.
So one more year.
So one more year. So we'll be talking about LCI, VRS next fall.
Gotcha.
Like one question, it may not be a fair question because it's not looking into the future, but do we as a school division have any concerns or impacts with the federal shutdown? And where do we need to kind of reappropriate money? Is anything of the federal shutdown affecting us locally in providing education?
Well, there was one communication that came out about food service. However, the amount of federal money we receive for food service is very minimal, and we should be able to cover that. And you know, if all things end here in the next few months, we did receive notification in December that we were to receive, and this was before the shutdown, a rather large payment for impact aid. It was at $2.7 million. And usually those, once we receive notification, the funds are delivered within 24 to 48 hours. Well, I didn't get it, and I didn't think I was going to get it, but it actually came in today.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
it doesn't seem like we're seeing much of a
Cliffhanger.
Yeah. So there doesn't appear to be much
Fantastic.
interruption
Okay,
of the
okay.
federal shutdown.
But if we see only concern with the food service, that's something we can handle without any problem
It is.
whatsoever.
It is. And Ms. Barr has been sending me updates, tracking
Right.
any parents that are concerned or whatnot. So we're working on
Fantastic.
that.
Thanks.
Right, and I think Mr. Bowen's last
I
presentation.
think he's done both of them. Or is it,
He has one more.
Okay, you have one more.
Unless
Busy
you-
time of the year for you.
Unless you want to add one more. All right, so the last presentation for Mr. Bowen this evening is going to be the CIP update. I sent, board members, I sent you some information in Friday notes regarding this, and I'll let Mr. Bowen share some of that information.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Mr. Richardson, members of the board, Dr. Shandor. I want to highlight a couple of changes that were recently made to the superintendent's proposed CIP program for fiscal years 2020 through 2025. Let me first point out on the slide that the numbers in red crossed out there are where the projects were originally placed when this CIP was presented to you at the December work session. So here you can see with Queens Lake, there's the top two projects. The first project is the A&E for the Queens Lake expansion, and then the second item is for the actual construction. You can see we moved the A&E up from 22 to 21, and we moved the construction up from 24, 25 to 22 and 23. And with that change, we shifted the construction of the new elementary school the proposed new elementary school at the Marquee location. We moved that from 22 and 23 to 23 and 24. And with the uncertainty regarding the timing for construction and need for new elementary space over the next few years, the school and county staff felt that shifting these projects more accurately reflects the needs of the school division. And in addition, the change will substantially improve the shorter-term debt picture for the county. So just as a reminder, the out years of the CIP are really a moving target. The CIP committee will continue to look at changes in enrollment capacity, and other priorities and issues across the division, and will ultimately determine the best course of action, which we would then bring back to the board for their approval. So this concludes the CIP update, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions you have.
If I may, and I'm going to say, Dr. Shandor and I have talked, and I kind of want just the public to hear more than anything else because the new school was my district. Our biggest concern is making sure we provide educational opportunities to all of our students. I know that Yorktown Elementary and Magruder Elementary were at capacity or over capacity at one point. So that's why the new school was discussed. In talking to you, and the concern was principals feel as though in those two schools, they are providing education in a way that they feel comfortable providing education. A number of years ago, we said we will expand a school versus building a school. As long as the schools have adequate space to build on, we will. I know Magruder is landlocked unless we take the activity field and build on it. And I'm sure the county doesn't want to do that, but we are landlocked at Magruder. Again, long as the principals feel as though they have adequate resources and space within the schools to meet the educational opportunities of those two schools, that would, to me, Mark, that would be the biggest concern. The other thing with regarding to space, I know when we identified the Marquee as the site for the new school, it was, we looked at all areas in District 1 where there was growth coming, and the Marquee was the site selected. So are we, in addition to working with the county, able to hold on to that site for future consideration versus losing a piece of property and then back to the drawing board and may have to settle for a site that wasn't the first choice? Am I making sense? How, we don't need it right now, and I'm okay with your sharing with me where the two schools were. But I just want to make sure that we won't lose that opportunity for the future if there is more growth.
Yeah, and that was a proffer, so we at this point, we're not going to lose that opportunity. The other thing I want to share is, you mentioned the numbers at Magruder and you mentioned the numbers at Yorktown Elementary School. The third component to that was the construction projects in the north, so the pace of construction that has moved forward. And this has been 3 years now. We've been watching it, and I know Dr. James has given you all plenty of updates about where they're breaking ground and all that work for the past couple of years. So is there anything else to add about the proffer or the land at the Marquee site?
No, sir, you covered it.
Okay.
And I'm okay when we talk, I'm fine with the two. I felt as though I want the public to know where we are with that and that we're okay with where we are with the two elementary schools. I know you shared there were some concerns, other districts, but we have those two.
Absolutely.
We're okay.
And we are. And the other, we have 3 or 4 schools in the Tab Grafton zone that Dr. James shared, last month or the month before, related to the FMP, where we look at instructional capacity and how we're stretched in a few of those schools. So, you'll see some resources committed there, but we're watching those numbers closely. I think our number is at 200 additional students. Is that the number that we received?
Right.
And I know that Mr. Bowen's had some discussions with Mr. Cross about re-examining those numbers for us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen, for that presentation, or all those presentations on the teacher
So
compensation.
you off the hook for a while?
Yes. 2019-2020 budget and the CIP. I know it's a busy time for you also, so you got a lot of stuff to do, I know, to get prepared for that, but thank you for that presentation. So Dr. Shandor, you have a report now on transportation?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Board members. This is per the board's request. We wanted to provide some information related to transportation. So I'm going to turn over to Dr. Carl James. He's going to share some information, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
All right, thank you, Dr. Shandor, Mr. Richardson, members of the board. This evening, I'm going to provide some information to you about transportation, where we are, things we've done this year, and what the picture looks like right now. As I start, I'll give some background information about transportation as we proceed to the rest of my points tonight. I think having the backdrop of how it operates is very important to consider as we move through. First of all, about hours of operation. On Mondays and Fridays, transportation staff reports to the main office at 5:30 a.m. and the office is open until 5:30 p.m. On Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, the office hours are extended by half an hour to 6 p.m. because we have after-school buses, all of our schools operating Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So that's the late hours. But it also tells you, since that's a 12 and a half hour day, then our staff is staggered with secretaries and dispatchers and area supervisors, so we can make sure we cover all of the hours, the 12 hours of the day that transportation is operating. Of course, we have athletics that goes beyond 6 p.m. There's always a mechanic or an area supervisor on call should there be a concern about transportation. And that also happens over the weekend. We are constantly concerned about what's happening on transportation, where the buses
what's the weather, what adjustment do we need to make? And of course, occasionally we may have a breakdown in the field, so that has to be responded to. Something new this year that came out of our focus groups with the bus drivers and bus assistants last spring was a transportation advisory panel. It meets monthly. There are bus drivers and bus assistants from all of the zones that meet with Ms. Lash and the area supervisors to take a look at any concerns that may come from the field. So the purpose is to receive feedback on transportation operations for the people that actually do the work. You know, what are they telling us? What are some of the concerns and issues that need to be addressed so we can address those issues? I can tell you I've attended some of those meetings and they've been very informative to hear the drivers and bus assistants tell us about their work and things that we need to do to improve the work and to better serve our parents and our students. We also share a lot of data with them about current operations. One, it would be attendance data, and I'll talk more about attendance in a minute, where we are now with that, about on-time arrivals. And the staff seems to take a lot of pride in the fact that our on-time arrival rate this year is better than it was last year, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Also talk about incidents and accidents, about how we respond to them and what's really happening, because all of those can be used for training. We have some driver trainers that are current drivers that help us with our drivers that need additional support. So that information that comes from them also helps us with that. And then we also share data about routes and stop change requests, because they come from drivers, because they're actually in the field. They know some things that we can't see through a simulation on a computer, and then the process to actually change routes to stops based on driver feedback. And we want to continue to get that feedback from them. I think it's very important that we take a good look at what they're telling us, because they're behind the wheel each day and they know better than us. Also, to give them some idea, we had the dispatchers come in. What it's like for a dispatcher. It's amazing to hear the dispatchers, which are former drivers, and now they're dispatchers. They say, I really had no idea of what they have to do each morning when they come in. Like the one that comes in at 5:30 in the morning, the first thing she needs to do is, do we have any call-outs? If we have call-outs, then what does that mean? What adjustments need to be made now? And we had some we knew about, some planned absences and all that, but what adjustments needs to be made now at 5:30 in the morning before we actually start to pick up high school students? And when you think about a 3-tier operation, and say, we have 81 regular morning routes, in addition to 33 special ed routes. So what does that really mean? If our driver absence rate is about 8% a day, which would be about 12 drivers. So if those 12 drivers have a route, or a run rather, on each tier, that means there are 36 runs that need to be adjusted. So we have to now make arrangements to pick up all of those students on those 36 runs and get that information to schools so they can let parents know. And the options for us when that happens would be to double runs. We have very little capacity now to double runs, because as you know, by the purchases we made, you see a lot of 77 passenger buses. I'm glad we started that some years ago, because with the driver shortage, that gives us greater capacity, fewer drivers, and able to cover the county. I can't tell you all of the routes have an assigned driver, but with the 8% or 12 drivers out on any given day, then we have several runs that need to be covered. So that's part of the magic that morning dispatcher has to do, is how I'm going to cover those runs. And part of it is talking to the drivers and see what we can do. Can we double or split routes? So maybe we have 3 buses that have some capacity that are close by, can go and pick up the students for the driver that's out. Or we do have 6 substitute drivers that are not assigned routes. That's not enough to cover the need for the 8% the drivers that are out each day. I can also tell you when it comes to that, because we can't double, then some students have to be told that the bus is going to be late. A bus is coming to get you. If it's during high school, that bus they had to double back to get other students is going to make them late for elementary. We try not to involve the same buses at middle school that were involved in high school, but that may happen. So when that happens, then we have to make an adjustment again for elementary schools. So it's an ongoing issue all the way through until we get all the kids to school. And our schools have been very good about allowing us to bring students and leave them early to go back and pick up other students, to lessen the amount of time that students are not at school receiving instruction. But that's one of the concerns that we have to work through. So then in the afternoon, we have to do the same thing again. Now in that, I've not mentioned field trips or athletics. I can tell you that just this year, we have completed almost 729 trips involving athletics and transportation to field trips or other requests. So that's also, we're talking about the same pool of drivers. So when you have a high school that needs to have students leave at 7 o'clock, in addition to the drivers that are out, that's also going to impact our ability to cover the runs. And it's very interesting when you see how this play out throughout the day about how we cover all of those trips. You may notice in the fall, you may have gotten a lot of questions because in the fall, we have a lot of athletics that are done in the late afternoon, early evening, because of daylight. Those buses may leave early, especially during elementary time. That creates a problem for us. In the winter, as you know, the majority of our athletics will occur at night or in the evening, well past the time for students to arrive home in the afternoon. But again, in the spring, we'll come back to that issue again with that amount of transportation. So, with all of that and the driver attendance, one question I'm some people are very interested in. You know, this year we instituted a bonus. We revised the bonus that we've done for a number of years. In past years, we have what we call perfect attendance. You didn't miss any time. You got one amount of money. If you miss 1 or 2 days, then you got another amount of money. And last year, based on that, we only had 24 drivers to qualify for a bonus for first semester. This year, we have increased the bonus. And right now, we're very close to the end of the semester. And we have 89 drivers, as of today, that are on track to receive the bonus. And that's good news that that's happening to us. So if you were to ask me, you have 6 substitute drivers, what would be optimal for the transportation department? We feel we had about 20 sub-drivers. And that would help us to cover all of the issues I talked about earlier. And I can tell you this year, since we started the year, we have 8 new drivers. We have one that should complete her behind the wheel. Almost like when I grew up, you did behind the wheel, and you had to do it with the state police officer. You had to do basically the same thing.
Are you the state police officer?
No, ma'am. I'm not qualified to do that. But that was quite interesting when I was a child. You rode with the trooper with his big hat, and you had to drive for him. That was,
Okay.
And we don't do that much anymore. But that's something that I had to do when I got my driver's license. And when I got my operator's license for a school bus, that was really more stringent than even driving with the officer. I feel the training for a bus driver more than I did the officer that I set aside. But anyway, with that, we have one that's complete behind the wheel training tomorrow, and then we'll have 4 that are in process of being hired to increase our sub pool. You know, we're still recruiting drivers to try to increase our number of subs because I realize the impact on families that it has when the bus is not there when we said it was going to be there. If you ask me about on-time arrival, even with what I just shared with you, we looked at the data, about 95% of our buses routes arrive on time. But it's a better percentage at high school than at middle and elementary because of some of the impacts I just talked about. So it's going to reduce that. And that's an increase of 16 percentage points over last year. In the afternoon, we're about 90%, but that's a decrease from last year. What we get for the afternoon about on-time arrival, just depends on where the buses are and when they actually get to the school. And again, high school's first, middle and elementary, and it's a domino effect when you get to elementary.
So what do you attribute that decrease to then? What do you attribute that decrease in the afternoons to?
Well, when you have field drivers, you have more absences on any one particular day, then that's going to impact when buses are arriving at school, based on all of the demands that have been fulfilled by transportation during that day.
And the other thing to consider would be looking at your afternoon activities as well. If you remember, we had 4 or 5 days where we were out of school for the storm. All those athletic schedules got flipped upside down, so then they were pushed back and there were a number of makeups there. So when you throw that in there, that may have
Well, it
a little bit
does.
of an impact on it.
You know, any demand or request for service outside of normal to and from school is going to impact that. And then it's going to be the timing of those requests when those buses leave. And high schoolers, as I said before, they're first, but then we go middle, and then we go elementary. So you'll see that impact is greater at elementary because that's just later in the day where those additional requests need to be provided transportation, and that's going to impact the arrival time. So one of the challenges we're facing, of course, we talked about the number of subs we have and the number we need. We also talk about our inability to double, to get kids home sooner because we are increased the ridership on each bus because we increased the bus capacity because of the number of drivers. And one of the other challenges we're facing is with the MyStop app. You may have heard a lot about the MyStop app. You know, that's part of the subscription to Versatran. It comes as part of the subscription. There's no additional fee. But in that, it's not one of the priorities for Versatran because we don't have the ability, because I spoke about doubling or tripling or splitting a route. When that happens, you cannot put all that information into the app in Versatran because it's only going to record a bus going on one designated route that's already pre-planned in the software. When we have to make those adjustments, then you can't show that in the app. So when that happens, we do send out notifications. We call the school, and the Secretary of Transportation is going to send out a notification, and she'll update those notifications. But parents have to log back into the app to get an updated notification, which is one of the, that's just the way the program works. And there's nothing that we can do about that particular software. So we're looking at that very closely. And when you look at the number of people that have subscribed to the app, we have 2,651 individuals. And that could be parents and students of the same family, part of the 2,651. So it has very low subscribership to the app, but I know that's very important information because we've got some positive feedback from parents when it gives them the information they need in the time that they need it. But as we have to double routes and split routes and all those kinds of things, it's kind of difficult to track that in the app. Another thing we have to consider when you're following the app is a planned route, and I'll talk briefly about that, versus an actual route. A bus has a planned route. There are many things that could happen in the course of a day. Traffic issues, breakdowns, road construction, assisting with other routes. That's going to take that bus off path, which then you can't follow in the app because it's now off path for a good reason. Just the other day, we had a situation where there was a tree service had blocked the road. They were at the top of a tree. So the driver had to turn around and go another way to pick up the students on the other part of the route. So when things like that happen in the community, you can't do that on the app. So you have to make that adjustment because we need to get students to school. So we have to make those adjustments as that occurs. Fortunately, we do have sometimes vehicle breakdowns. So that's going to slow up. But that's not our norm. But occasionally, you know, with any mechanical system, you're going to have a failure sometimes. So that's one of the things that we constantly work through. So with that, that's my basic information about the transportation update at this point. I'll be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Does the app have real-time GPS tracking of the buses?
It does, because it's reading our GPS. Each bus has a GPS system as part of this Versatran, so it can track where the bus is, but it can only follow it. It tells you it's off path because it has to read the path that's designed in the system. We know where the bus is, but the app is not going to be able to show a subscriber where the bus is.
Are you looking at alternatives to that app? I mean, there's got to be, if you can't modify something this important, in my opinion, coming from a software background,
Sure.
are you looking at alternatives? Because you guys see the posts, the parents think.
I think to put this into perspective, we've never had an app before. We've never had tracked our buses in 50 years. We've done this for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, wherever we're on the year. So, we can certainly look at alternatives. We can. My question would be, let's continue working down this path to see, can we work out the kinks in this system and give it a year, work through it. And I understand the frustrations. I've got 3 kids in school and my bus is late from time to time. However, do I think that the app is the answer to all of our problems? I don't. I think continuing to add to our workforce, to continue to bring more subs in so that we have more opportunities to fulfill the routes, but also have people on standby. I'd love to put an ad out to have people come and drive specifically for field trips. It would be lovely to have a number of folks apply for York County to say, hey, I'll do field trips and I'll do athletic events. That would be wonderful, because then we wouldn't be pulling folks from routes. But we can certainly look at alternatives. 'Cause there's a number of different, when we were at VSBA and other conferences you go to, there's a showroom floor of, different options. That's certainly something.
I don't know if looking at another option is at this point, because I look at it like, Mr. Richardson and I were talking the other day, when we rolled out the ability for parents to see gradebook, to look at their children's grades, there was some growing pain with that. And we had a group, of folks that were really logging in quite frequently to check their kids' grades, and realized that phone would ring, the post would post, kind of thing, that it wasn't updated or kept as updated as they wanted, because we had to go through that cycle of just working the kinks out and the training and the expectation of how this was going to work, and evolved into what we have today. But it didn't happen in 3 months. It took, the time for it to get to where it is. I see this as something that's probably going to work kind of the same way. We introduce new technology, but with that comes growing pains, tweaking, maybe a software update at some point along the way from the company that we are dealing with. But I'm kind of shocked at the subscriber rate of where it is right now. But it maybe it's because parents are just, many of them are not using the technology because they just don't see it as a need for their families or for themselves. I just want to say, Carl, what impresses me the most about that whole presentation and all the data you just gave us is that it proves a big point, and that is you and your staff and transportation continually look at, observe, gather data points and information to make things better. And what you just presented is detailed enough as a board member. As a board member, I can at least reflect, if I have a conversation with a parent, that we are constantly looking at ways to improve. And we're looking at tiny data points. I mean, specifics you pulled out that directly can make one route improve, or to create a change that will benefit the entire school division in a big perspective. So thank you for continuing to do what you're doing, and your staff.
Thank you. They really work hard on it.
They are.
One of the things I constantly is go down just to talk to them and give them a pep talk and see how they're doing, because they constantly feel like I'm trying as hard as I can to get everybody to where they need to be in the time that they need to be there.
Like you talked about, the time a bus driver reports to work. That doesn't include the time they have to go out and do that pre-inspection of their bus.
Right.
Before they even put the key in it. And the time they have to prepare that bus to hit the road before they leave their driveway or the bus parking lot or wherever. You didn't even mention that. There's so much that goes into a bus. I mean, we were able to adjust salaries, do some incentives. Thank goodness we were able to do those things. Because think about a bus driver that turns their back on 66 kids or something. The safety of everyone, not me, every one of those children, their safety is in the hands of that bus driver. And every decision they make, and sometimes they're snap decisions, I don't want a bus driver rushing. I don't want a bus driver feeling like they got to push the accelerator a little faster, or I'm not going to slow down to a complete stop for the stop sign. I want bus drivers to feel comfortable that we're backing them, that we're supporting them, that we're gathering information to make their day better, and we're compensating them fairly, but at the same time, they're safe and on that bus. And I think the public needs to understand that, yes, that bus may be late, but your child arrives safely.
We have some bus drivers tell us they have come from other surrounding school divisions, that they really appreciate the fact that they can talk to staff members here, and the fact that we focus on safety over schedule.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, safety over schedule. We don't get the kids there, but we need to get them there safely.
And I appreciate your transportation advisory panel. That's new, I know, started last year, but it's great to see that in place. Two questions. I know with history, we went to the double and triple tier because of funds and trying to catch up on funds and cutting back on transportation. Are you able to say how many triple runs we have and how many double versus double runs in the division? And is there a concern or a need to decrease the triple runs and have more double runs? Would that help the concerns that you have? And, I know we talked about teacher salaries and doing better with that. But I see coming behind that possibly transportation and more buses and drivers. I don't know. That's one question, comment.
Okay. I can go ahead and respond
Okay.
to that one. When we looked at, based on capacity and the highest ridership on any given day for any route, at high school, we have the ability to double 9 routes.
Okay.
That's all. At middle school, because, capacity now increases a little bit at the middle schools, and we can double 6 middle school routes and 2 elementary routes based on ridership. So what I'll hear sometimes on the morning in the radio when dispatch is calling for help and a bus is nearing the end of its route, is say, well, I have the capacity to pick up 10 more kids or 13 more kids. So sometimes I hear 3 drivers say, I can help.
Okay.
Just tell me what I need to do now to help.
Okay.
So we can try to get the students to school as soon as we possibly can when we have a driver out. But because we've decreased the number of drivers, we increased the capacity by purchasing the larger buses. That decreased the ability to double or to split routes.
And the reason I ask that, we make decisions year after year based on where we are
Yes,
at that point in time. And is it something that for the future, do we need to look at? Where we buy bigger buses for more capacity.
Right.
And that means, I don't know, it's just something to say, do we need to refocus from where we came to say, do we need to make some changes and kind of pull back?
Right. I would say we need to continue to buy the large capacity buses because it helps us in a number of areas other than just before and after school runs. But also, it goes back to the number of sub-drivers because we're going to have drivers that, for whatever reason, won't be at work today. And a driver is ill, I think it's best for them to say, I'm ill, and I'm not driving the bus today.
Okay.
Because again, safety
Okay.
over schedule.
2 other questions. We've talked about it, and I know at one point we were looking for a location to park buses in the Bruton district. Are we even closer to looking at a site that would house those?
We have a meeting actually, is it Thursday?
Tomorrow, right.
It's tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I'll wait to hear.
So
Oh,
the
wait,
meeting,
you- okay.
we're actually going over to meet with Mr. Morgan and his team tomorrow about that topic and a number of others. We were looking at some different opportunities up there. One of them would not have ended up being a good opportunity for us. Again, through the CIP, we're also looking at whether it's Queens Lakes parking lot or some different options. But we're still going to go back and have some discussions tomorrow with the county related to other opportunities up there. But we're trying. We're really trying to get those buses off of that Magruder's parking lot.
Something came up about option of seatbelts for buses. Have we heard any more about that and where we stand with that?
I'm gonna look at Mr. Lash over there. I think that's gonna be considered by the General Assembly this session.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
right?
It is, and they're circulating, they're trying to get feelers on that from different school divisions and our state association.
Okay.
So that's out there as well as advertising on school buses. But one thing our state associations asked that if the state does mandate the seatbelts, that they hold the driver as well as the school division harmless in the event a child chooses not to wear the seatbelt. Because for a driver driving a school bus, if you go to a 3-point seatbelt, the seatbacks go higher So you won't even be able to see probably the tops of most elementary children's heads. So it would be hard for a driver to look in the
See
mirror
back,
to see
yeah.
who's wearing them and who's not. So, yeah, that has come up, and so it's advertising on school buses.
Thanks. Last comment, and it's more of just a FYI, not for us. One of my sons and his family live in Rhode Island.
Yes.
And we were up there at the end of the holiday when the kids were back in school. For each stop in the city, an aide gets off the bus, takes the kids off the bus, looks around the bus, gets back on the bus, and the driver moves on. That's at every stop in the city. And I was amazed just to think, because I thought it was I didn't see it, I thought it was the school bus driver, but driver stayed on. It was the aide getting off and making sure that the bus was clear before taking off. Anyway, FYI. Thank you.
And I just have one comment, two comments to make. Something I'd asked the question several months back, and it pertains to much of what Mr. Anderson said, that I was inquiring what we paid for that sort of thing, and found out that it was in addition to another program we got. And it was just my opinion then that when you get something for free, it's not necessarily the top of the line, that maybe we could look at some other apps for that. But then when I heard the presentation tonight that a little over 2,000 of our parents are using the app, and it could be really less than that if you look at households, and we have a little over 12,000 students, you really have to balance that with cost effectiveness too. So really something we need to look at. But
Well, people don't use what doesn't work. I mean, if there were, and there are apps out here where you could leverage the GPS location of the bus to provide real-time information to the parents so they could physically see where the bus is and when the bus would get there,
absolutely.
you would get more people using it. But people caught on, we test drove this app for the last quarter, I think, of last spring.
Yeah, last 6-8 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, so it didn't take long for people to catch on that the bus information that they were getting was hard-coded in there. And if you have no ability to change that or to manipulate it, then in today's world, it's useless. So I understand some people's concern about going down that road of looking at alternatives. But as a software developer, you need to look at alternatives. It's not the end all, but it could definitely help in regards to relations with the community, and maybe even some of the bus drivers, because they know that the data is real time. So I would ask that alternatives be looked at, and then we can talk about the cost or whatever.
Well, we're going to let this play out for a little bit to try to see how far do we want to run with what we have.
Again, this is the first year, so I guess the question is, I present the budget February 4th.
Yeah.
So, that's a decision that once I present superintendent's budget to y'all, and that's something that y'all can consider.
I think that's something we can discuss then with the budget.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Carl. That was really
Yeah,
good.
that was a good presentation, Carl.
I'll tell you what it did for me. It just kind of showed me what goes on behind the scenes, a little more glimpse into what those folks go through early in the morning and all day long. And, so that really, really helpful. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Dr. James. And I know equity has been on the topic of discussion and trainings for the VSBA here recently, and especially more so in the past year. And it was asked by Ms. Haywood to be put on the agenda. So I'm going to let Dr. Shandor just do a short brief.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Dr. James is going to pull the pages up on the screen. Do you have the policies as well? There we go. So we had some preliminary discussion related to equity, and I wanted to share under personnel, we have section G, equal opportunity non-discrimination under GB, and that policy was reviewed by the board and approved January 22nd. Dr. James provided some information through board brief and discussion and a board policy review last spring. And then, I'm sorry, that's not correct. It was students, the equal opportunity for students non-discrimination, JB was last spring. And Then the board approved that May 21st, 2018, where the other policy for Section G personnel, equal employment opportunity non-discrimination, GB, was reviewed January 22nd last year. So that's just a little bit of background information. I'll open it up to the board for any discussion.
And one of the reasons, and I will start, one of the reasons I asked to look at this, I know some of the local school divisions have an equity policy for both staff and students. I know Hampton has one, and that's why I was asking, where are we with one? I did not bring those samples with me, but I want to just, again, from my perception, and I sit here with the number of years that I've been on this board, and up until this year, for a number of years, we have had one African American principal. We now have two. There was a time I didn't have to question that. And I sit back and wonder, where are we now as a school division with respect to diversity? I know I sit here amongst a group of a white men making these comments. I say, even if I were not here, I would hope in your hearts you would be considering the same kind of concerns that I'm seeing. We now have two. So again, where are we? We are seeing a number of people who have been with the division for a number of years who are retiring. And where are we with replacing? And when I say diversity, don't even think I'm stepping back on equality, on quality. I'm not. You recruit, you interview the best and hire the best. But in that best, I know there is got to be diversity. So that's all I'm saying, is that I think we need to pay attention to it. I think we need to not let it get too far from us. The day that Dr. James retires, and hopefully, no, it's not tomorrow, it's not this year. But I'm saying, you have to face what is in front of you. You have to. And if you don't, we're going to be digging ourselves out of a hole that we were in a number of years ago when I started on this board. So that's all I'm saying, is just to have an open ear, open eye. If we need to put it into policy, we put it into policy. And I will get some of those, and I had them with me at home, yes, because VSBA has sent me several from across the state. And I just have not, over the holiday, dealt with that, but I'll bring you back. But that was a concern where we are as a division. If you think about it, and what sparked a concern was that the couple that spoke to the board in the November meeting about the diversity at Grafton, Middle Grafton High. Middle. That kind of, I know they had gone through the school with and addressed it where we asked our parents to do so, but they felt the need to address the board. And that was one of, okay, do we have concerns? I know what we say in a closed session stays in a closed session, but what we're seeing as far as student concerns spark a concern. And if we are having those kind of concerns that come out in that closed sessions that we're not at liberty to talk about, then for me, where are we as a division? And do we need to look at policy as a board policy that strengthens what we say and what we do? That's where I come from, and I've shared those with you on a number of occasions, but that was one of the reasons I asked to have this on the agenda. And also, we talked about a diversity committee and to find out when that committee would be implemented.
Carl, do you want to talk through the Diversity Equity Committee?
Sure, certainly. What I'll do, I'll share some information to you about the strategic plan and some of the objectives there. As you know, we report out to you annually on the objectives and the achievement within each objective of the plan. There are several objectives in the existing, do one thing at a time. And you have this sheet in your packet tonight with those objectives highlighted in blue that relates to equity and diversity. And the first one on goal 1 under student achievement, let me say it before I get to there. Our strategic plan focuses on equitable outcomes for students and the implementation of relevant professional development strategies for our staff. And as these highlighted objectives here are going to relate to that comment about what we do to have equitable programs for our students, and then what we need to do to develop our staff. So the first one you see here relates to exceeding federal and state targets for all students and for subgroups of students, including closing the achievement gap. Because we all believe and we all know that's very important to look at that achievement gap and what we need to do to close that gap. The second one is going to relate to the gifted program. The underrepresented students in the gifted program. Are we missing opportunity there? How we need to look at students that are identified for the program and what we need to do to make sure that they're included. Another objective, the fifth objective here, talks about underrepresented student groups and also student participates in advanced placement classes. You know, you can do a lot to recruit students and make them ready to take the higher rigor or higher level of classes by the work we do with them from elementary all the way through. So all of that's also in that goal. Something Dr. Gould talked about under student experiences. She did that this evening about evaluation of our programs for students with disabilities and things we need to do. And there were questions from the board to her about what are some things we're going to do in the short term to make sure that we're staying on target to meet that particular goal. The other one, and this is one, Ms. Haywood, you talked about the recruitment and retention of a diverse staff, and that's going to be in goal 3. And the other part that I'll focus you on is going to be on the goal 4, school culture. As you may remember when we developed this strategic plan, we looked at several things that we felt were going to be important to meet the things that you just talked about, Ms. Haywood. And the first one is, of course, going to be under goal 4 was the relevant professional development about fostering respect for different cultures and how we integrate that into the curriculum. The other one was developing cultural learning opportunities to prepare our students to engage successfully with students from different cultural backgrounds, whether it's in our community or even on the global scene, because you know that's the way the world is nowadays. And the last one, Dr. Butler has reported to you earlier about this, is about programs and protocols to reduce out-of-school suspensions and to reduce the number of exclusionary practices. And he shared some of the work that he's done. He's done a great job with his team, with Mrs. Parr and now Mrs. Saunders, on working with schools to develop strategies to look at out-of-school suspensions, to look at exclusionary practices, so we meet those targets there. And the other question you asked, Ms. Haywood, it was about equity and diversity. As part of this goal, Dr. Butler and his staff are working on establishing a committee for equity and diversity. And the charge of this committee is going to be to look at our objectives here and provide us feedback on our progress with accomplishing those objectives, and to further then provide ongoing feedback to us about what they see and give us feedback about our practices relating to diversity and equity throughout the school division. So he's in the throes now of formulating that particular committee, but it's an outgrowth of the strategic plan and what we need to do to have our stakeholders provide us feedback on what we're doing to address equity and diversity.
Fantastic. I know we have made these changes in our strategic plan, and they are important, and we keep them and move forward. There are just some other issues, and I didn't know how they fell into the strategic plan, or did we need to expand that more? With respect to the committee, any idea when the committee is going to be up and operational? I know I'm putting Dr. Butler on.
No, we're hoping to have our first meeting next month in February. We've been in the plan process again. We had to wait for cabinet to consider it, and we want to get some feedback, of course, from the board as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Ms. Haywood, the other thing is Dr. Carroll presented last month related to hiring for administrators, teachers, and other staff members, and gave those percentages. We'd be happy to set up a time to have the three of us connect to review that information.
Sounds good.
Could I sit down on that as well?
Sure.
Yeah, did you miss the meeting?
I know the December meeting.
Yeah.
Yes,
that was
Mrs.
the-
Haywood was
that
not
was
at
the-
that
was
one.
not
oh,
here.
okay, that was the one.
Then I'll go back and look at the minutes. But I want to follow up on something that you said. So to address the exclusionary practices and out-of-school suspensions. You guys got the Swiss system, which I was fortunate enough to have a demo of. So here we are at the end of the first semester. What data do we have to sort of see if that disparity index is dropping? Because based on the data that was released at the end of 2017, York County was second only behind James City County in a disparity index in regards to out-of-school suspension for black students. Where do we stand? Because you guys led me to believe that that system was going to help look at that because of the detail that you could drill down on. I mean, you could drill down into the time
Where,
of day,
when,
the time
how,
of day,
sure,
what part of the
yeah.
school,
Yeah.
wherever. So, is there any data from the first quarter on that, or?
Well, we're going to pull it at semester break. So again, I'm not sure if that semester break. So we're going to pull that information at semester break. We'll be happy to share that information with the board.
Great, yeah. And just one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, my first meeting with Board of Supervisors, December 2017, Dr. Guy made a presentation about the student population diversity breakdown of the county. I posed a question about African-American teachers, what's the percentage? And it was relayed to me that York County sort of operates under trying to have the same percentage of minority teachers as we do students. With that in mind, do we effectively place the minority teachers in schools with demographics that could best benefit that? Because we all know, those of us that come from academics know that African American students perform better with African American students and teachers and administrators, and the same for all the other socioeconomic classes. So, how are we in the breakdown of using those minority resources in schools with the demographics that could best benefit from that?
Okay. So first of all, it's not codified in policy or SOPs to match the student demographic. Now, when I give you those data points in December, I give those as a comparator. And where we're at right now is minority students are running at 40.1%, and Black African American is at 12.4%. As far as the corresponding teachers are running at 21.74, so about half of that comparative percentage. But there was an increase of over 10% this year on the new hires. And then Black African American, 12.4% student, 9.78% staff. So getting close because our we increased to 9.78% in this class. So we almost doubled there also. As far as moving people around, we're committed to the principals hiring the people because they have to choose who's best for their school. We don't artificially move people to try to match up demographics because you might be just kind of chasing something you can't catch, because even if you were to match the demographics in the building, especially in a secondary setting, how do you make sure that they're teaching the classes that students would be taking? So it's with these small percentages, I don't know if you could get there.
I'll send my follow-up questions through an email so we don't take up the rest of the evening, if that's all right.
All right. If there's no other questions or discussion, I don't hear any. So if not, I want to thank everyone for tonight's presentations and the updates you provided. Appreciate all that. So our next regular meeting will be on Monday, January the 28th at 7 p.m. upstairs here in the boardroom. And everyone have a wonderful week. We're now adjourned. Thank you.